welcome to Inspire the Spirit for this Wednesday. We're now in the month of June. I hope everybody had an enjoyable Memorial Day weekend. Now that we've cleared Memorial Day and taken a quick break to celebrate that, we're going to jump back into our most famous verses of the Bible, a series that we've been doing, and we're just a little over halfway through that. Today's verse of the week is Romans chapter 8, verse 28. And it says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." Now, why is this verse famous? This verse is a favorite of people who are facing hard seasons in life. Maybe you're in a difficult season yourself, or you're going through something. It's a reminder that God can bring good even out of pain and confusion. There was a young man named Dustin Armstrong. And Dustin Armstrong was from a small town. And he was a star athlete. He was good at everything: football, basketball, baseball. He was your all-American boy. And Dustin thought a lot of himself because he was the town's shining star. He dated the pretty cheerleaders. He wore the Letterman jacket with all the awards and had all the trophies, and everything he did, he excelled at. And he liked to party, and he liked the pretty girls, and he liked the fast cars, and he just had an arrogance, cockiness about himself, and he just portrayed that through his life. Well, after his freshman year, he was already starting on the varsity football team, and he was going into his sophomore season, and tragedy struck. He had a sister that was a year older, and one night they were out. They just got driver's licenses, and they were out. They realized it was late, and they were speeding to get back home when they flew over a railroad track, blew out a tire, lost control, and it flipped the car. His sister was in critical condition and rushed to the hospital. The doctor said she's probably not going to make it. He remembers running to the hospital with his mom and dad and them all praying, and he remembers he was mad at God. How could you let this happen to my sister? She never did anything wrong. She was really a good kid, a good student, and now she was fighting on life support. And Dustin was very angry at God for allowing something bad to happen to somebody good. And he remembers holding his sister's hand as she laid there unconscious, and the doctor said she's probably not going to make it, and she made it. She pulled out. And the doctors told the family her brain injury is so severe, she's probably never going to walk again. But Dustin, being a star athlete, started helping her with her rehab and helping her train. He would even do extra exercises, and he studied, and he worked really hard with her to be her backup, and he became her coach because he was convinced he was such a good athlete he could coach her into it. And lo and behold, a few months later, she stood up on her own, much to the shock of the doctors. And she continued rehab and therapy, and Dustin was engaged all the way. Still mad at God, but going to prove God wrong. And lo and behold, she took a few steps. Well, then they said, well, she's probably never going to be able to speak either because of the brain injury. And Dustin, after practice and school and games, would always go to the hospital, and then following up on therapy sessions, would read with her and go through speech stuff with her. And sure enough, she started to speak again. And Dustin says he remembers that entire sophomore year, he wasn't partying. He was still doing sports, but it wasn't about him anymore. And he remembers the prayer times with his mom and dad in the hospital. And somewhere along the way, that bitterness and anger towards God disappeared. And he started appreciating what he had, his family, his sister's life and recovery. And he said it just started to change. And as he went into his junior year, his sister had made a full recovery from this horrible car accident. And he remembers being so overwhelmingly thankful that he gave his life to Christ. And he thanked God for everything, taking a horrible situation and making something good out of it. And he gave his life to Christ, and he started going to youth groups. And then his senior year, he becomes the head of his FCA chapter in the high school and continued to do that as he went to a small college and finished his career. And he always used that testimony, and he remembered this verse, that we know in all things God works for the good of those who love him. And sometimes all things, the thing is not necessarily a good thing. He had went through a horrible trauma, tragic family event, and yet through that, God used him not only to help somebody else, but to change him from the inside out. Paul wrote these words to Christians who were suffering and afraid during this era. They were still under suppression of the Roman Empire. And they're trying to get the church up and running. And they're kind of being oppressed by the Romans, and they're doing it in secret, and it's very difficult. And he reminded them by this truth that was simple but powerful. God is working, even when life feels out of control. And the world feels a little bit out of control right now. There's so much conflict in the world. There's so much political divide. And this verse reminds us, it does not mean everything that happens to us is good. It does not mean everything that's going to happen to you in your life is a good thing. The thing might be bad. The pain, the loss, the injustices, they're obviously real. Excuse me, but instead, it means that none of it's wasted in God's hands. He can take good and bad and weave them together into his bigger story of redemption. The promise rests on who God is, not on our ability to fix things or make sense of them. His love and purpose are steady even when our circumstances are not. There was a senator named Max Cleland who was a Georgia senator back in the 70s and 80s. And he had served in Vietnam prior to going into politics. And Max was sent on a mission at the Battle of Quezon San. And there was a hill where they needed to get a radio, a remote radio antenna to communicate to the forces. On the hill was a machine gun bunker trying to fight off the enemy, and Max was on a helicopter. It was going to fly to the top of this hill. They were going to drop him off, and his job was to set up this communication antenna. Max is in a helicopter with two very young raw recruits that had never even been in combat yet, and they were scared to death. And the chopper's coming into the hill, and there's a bunker over here with the U.S. Marine firing at the enemy, and there's the spot there to set the radio antenna up. As the chopper lands, Max jumps out of the helicopter, and he's bent over because the chopper blades are turning, and he notices a grenade bounces on the ground. And he thinks, oh no, a grenade just fell off my flak jacket. And he reaches down to grab the grenade because he sees the pin is missing. It's a live grenade. And he quickly tries to grab it and throw it away. And as he reaches down, the grenade explodes. Max loses a hand and both of his legs. And he's unconscious. The Marine machine gunner left the bunker and performed triage on him and bandaged him up, and they got him in the helicopter to take him back. Now think about this. Vietnam was late 60s, early 70s. There's no cameras, there's no recordings, there's not a lot of in-depth review and investigations. Bad things happened, and you forgot about them. There wasn't a lot of recording and documentation. Life went on. Max was flown out, eventually sent back home to rehab and recover. He never met or talk to the two guys behind him, that machine gunner that saved his life. None of that happened. And Max recovered, not really even knowing what happened with the rest of the mission. He becomes a U.S. Senator. And Max Cleland's a very devout Christian. He's part of a senatorial Bible study group. And they meet, and the men would meet every morning and talk about things and share their faith. And Max was struggling. It was 30 years from the anniversary of when the grenade blew up on him. And he told the group, I haven't slept in a long time. I have this recurring nightmare. How could I be so careless that I would let that grenade fall out and put everybody around me in danger? And every night I'm dreaming that this grenade pops off of me and I bend over to grab it, and at the explosion, he pops up, waking up in sweat. He goes, I just can't live with that regret. I'm in a wheelchair, I have no legs, I'm missing a hand, all because of something I did wrong. I put people in jeopardy. And it was a heavy burden. That night, the History Channel ran a story. They were doing a series on Vietnam. And that very Battle of Quai Son, they had interviewed people that was there. And the machine gunner that had saved him was on this show talking about, he remembers this time the chopper came in and this guy was to get out and set up the deal. And they were talking about how young the soldiers were then, barely out of high school. And he said as he put the man back in the chopper, he turned around and the other soldier was crying, saying, that was my grenade. I forgot to tape it, because you're supposed to tape them, tape the handle and the pin, and clip it onto your vest. He goes, I forgot to tape it, and I didn't secure the pin. My grenade fell off, and that man picked up my grenade, and it blew up on him. And he saved us all. Max always thought it was his grenade. Come to find out, it wasn't. One of the other senators was watching this show, and the next morning said, Max, you got the story wrong. I want you to watch this episode. That wasn't your grenade. That was that young recruit behind him. There's a story out there telling about how things happened so fast and our troops were so young and so unprepared that he made a mistake and he forgot to tape his grenade and tape the pin down and secure it properly. And he remembered jumping out and hitting the ground and the grenade popping out in front of you, Max, and you saved them. You didn't put them in jeopardy. You're the hero. Max was overcome with relief. He went and watched it, did some following up with some people, and sure enough, a burden he had carried for 30 years, thinking he was at fault, going through a difficult time, God had worked out, because Max had used that story and his injuries as a platform to share his faith to the world. And he had a famous saying. He said, remember, things don't work out. God works out things. And that's from him. So what can this verse mean to you? If life feels messy right now, a little uncertain, you got a lot to do on your to-do list, it's just moving fast, you can trust God's not abandoned you. He can bring meaning and good even from the hardest parts of your story. We have to learn to rely on Romans 8:28, just like Dustin the athlete did with his sister, just like Max, the ex-Vietnam vet, did in his Senate meetings. We have to learn to fight fear with hope. It seems there's always something to worry about. Natural disasters, current potential wars, shaky finances, broken relationships. You always feel like you've got unmet expectations. There's crazy political, cultural, and racial divides in our country. There's senseless violence on the streets. You worry about your kids, your jobs, your health. Do we need to keep going? More things to worry about. But many of those things that we fear just like the two stories I shared, are out of our control. We can't always control what happens to us, but we can choose our response. You can constantly be worried. You can constantly be negative. You can constantly be anxious, fearful, even critical or bitter. Or you can be known for seeing the good in people, choosing joy in your life, offering encouragement to others, looking for God's fingerprints, and always finding something to be grateful for. In either case, whatever you choose, the cycle will feed itself. A cycle of fear, anxiety, and worry will feed more fear, anxiety, and worry. A cycle of joy, hope, and looking for God's fingerprints will produce more of that. Like hummingbirds, they're attracted to sweet things, flowers and the nectar and the feeders. What's a vulture attracted to? Dead things. And you know what? Each of those birds finds exactly what they're looking for. And that's the way our lives are. We'll always find what we are looking for. Why? Because darkness and evil exist, but so does light and goodness. Good and evil are everyday realities, and we must decide as followers of Christ who we're going to trust and how we're going to spend our lives. So what can we do? The Bible says in Proverbs 12:25, anxiety weighs down the heart, but a kind word cheers it up. We can fight anxiousness with hope. We can ward off worry with truth-filled encouragement. We can resist fear by offering life-giving words. We can refuse to settle for living a scared life. We can expose the darkness to the light of Jesus. So the next time you feel anxiety and fear weighing down your heart, something bad's happening, a thing is happening, you're going through something, ask God for help and encouragement. Remember, He's always a prayer away. And don't forget our verse of the week, Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Have a wonderful week. We're off and running to the unofficial start of summer. We look forward to continuing our message series in the weeks to come. Have